At the edge of a war-torn land, a man named Solomon, a forced laborer, unearthed something unimaginable. A flawless pink diamond. It wasn't just rare, it was the kind of gem that could shake the world's diamond market to its core. But, as a man treated like a slave, Solomon dared not openly claim it. He had just seen what happened to another worker, a man who tried to hide a rice grain-sized diamond in his mouth. He was caught and shot on the spot without hesitation, so the question loomed, how does one hide a diamond this large and brilliant? Solomon's heart pounded violently. His eyes darted across the camp for any possible hiding place. Just then, as if fate intervened, an explosion erupted. The camp's water pump blew up, sending guards scrambling in confusion. Seizing the moment, Solomon crouched, slipped the gem between his toes, and covered it with practiced calm. Moments later, he excused himself to the bathroom, a ruse to move away from the chaos. But the rebel commander had already grown suspicious. He blocked Solomon's path, eyes narrowed. A full-body search followed, but with the diamond hidden beneath his foot, nothing was found. Solomon finally reached a private corner, intending to stash the gem for good. But before he could move, he felt the cold press of a gun barrel against his skull. The commander had followed him silently, unwilling to give up. Just as Solomon prepared to surrender the diamond, destiny turned once again. The government launched a surprise aerial strike. A bomb landed right beside them. The rebel commander was severely wounded, while Solomon managed to escape amid the chaos. He ran to a dead tree nearby and buried the diamond beneath it, memorizing the spot. But just as he thought he was safe, Solomon was captured by government forces and thrown into prison. To his horror, the wounded rebel commander was there too, alive, though blinded in one eye. The moment he saw Solomon, he shouted furiously to everyone around, "That kid has a priceless pink diamond. Anyone who finds it gets a reward." Suddenly, every prisoner stared at Solomon with ravenous eyes. To protect himself, Solomon vehemently denied the accusation. He even stripped off all his clothes to prove he had nothing to hide. That might have fooled the petty criminals in the prison, but it didn't fool Danny Archer. Danny, a white man born and raised in Africa, was a hardened black market diamond smuggler with a dangerous reputation. Where there were diamonds, there was Danny, lurking in the shadows. It was a perilous line of work. One mistake could mean instant death. But Danny had survived it all. He'd mastered the skills of evasion, deception, and flawless smuggling. That day, Danny had just scored a fresh batch of diamonds. To get them across the border, he disguised himself as a magazine journalist and hired local shepherds to smuggle the stones, one of which was sewn inside a sheep. But even a veteran like Danny could slip. He was caught in the act, with no options left. Danny reached out to a powerful warlord known as Colonel Goat, Kode, a man feared across Africa as the leader of a vast mercenary army. But even Colonel Goat had his limits. Instead of helping, he had Danny thrown into prison. Yet in a strange twist of fate, prison gave Danny a valuable lead. He overheard the chaos about Solomon and the legendary pink diamond. After his crew bailed him out, Danny moved fast. He informed his partners of the gem's existence and gave a single instruction: do whatever it takes to get Solomon out. With his years of experience, Danny understood the diamond's value far better than Solomon. It wasn't just about money. If he got the stone, Danny could buy his way out of Africa, out of Colonel Goat's control, into a new life of freedom. Back at his hotel, Danny wasted no time. He locked the door, grabbed a knife, and pried open one of his own teeth. Hidden inside, a backup diamond. He only ever used it in emergencies. As he left to exchange it for money, a shadowy figure slipped into his hotel room. Meanwhile, Solomon had also been released on bail, given a small sum of cash, a gesture meant to prevent him from falling back into the hands of law enforcement. Solomon was confused but grateful. He didn't overthink it. All he wanted now was to find his family again. Before the war, Solomon was just a humble fisherman. He and his loving wife raised 3 children in a quiet coastal village. Life was modest, but it was peaceful. Their oldest son, Rhea, was especially bright, disciplined, thoughtful, and eager to learn. Every morning, Ria would walk 5 kilometers through mountain trails just to attend school, never missing a day. That day, as Solomon went to pick up his son from school, a group of rebel soldiers suddenly stormed the village, armed to the teeth. These were ruthless, bloodthirsty men who gunned down civilians indiscriminately the moment they arrived, including women and children. They showed no hesitation, no emotion as they killed. In the chaos, Solomon managed to help his wife and children escape, but he was captured on the spot. At first, the rebels were going to cut off his arm, as they did with many others. But upon seeing that Solomon was physically strong and well-built, they decided to keep him alive. He was shackled and sent to a diamond mine to serve as slave labor, leading to the events at the beginning of this story. Elsewhere, Danny, after exchanging his diamonds for cash, arrived at a bar. But he wasn't there for pleasure. He was looking for a contact who could sell him a pistol. That's when his attention was drawn to a woman named Maddie. Initially, Danny just wanted a one-night companion, but after a brief conversation, he realized she was a journalist, and to his surprise, she correctly guessed that he was a diamond smuggler. Danny despised journalists, but Maddie insisted on following him, demanding that he provide information to expose the illegal blood diamond trade and the powerful men behind it. But no matter how beautiful she was, Danny wasn't foolish enough to share secrets with a stranger, especially a reporter. The two parted on bad terms. Later that night, returning to his hotel, Danny found his room ransacked. He immediately knew what had happened. One of his so-called allies had leaked information about the pink diamond to Colonel Coetzee. While Danny knew that trust meant nothing in a place like this, he couldn't help but feel rage boiling inside him. Moments later, the man who had broken into his room revealed himself. Though they exchanged polite words, both men were fully aware of each other's true intentions. Danny decided to face Colonel Coetzee directly. When they met, he didn't hold back. He punched the colonel in the face to vent his anger. Surprisingly, Coetzee later invited Danny to his estate for tea. This man wasn't just any military leader. He was the most powerful warlord in Africa. He traded diamonds while working with the government to suppress rebel forces, profiting from both sides of the war. A man like him wouldn't let a rare pink diamond slip through his fingers. He gave Danny a clear ultimatum: find the diamond, or else. If Danny succeeded, his past business losses would be forgiven. But Coetzee also knew what Danny truly wanted: to escape Africa and start over. So he knelt, grabbed a handful of red African soil, and said coldly, "This is your home. You'll never leave Africa." Danny, who had grown up under Coetzee's thumb, knew the man's brutality all too well. He swallowed his pride and focused all his attention on finding Solomon. But Solomon no longer trusted anyone. No matter what Danny said, Solomon denied ever seeing a pink diamond. Frustrated, Danny decided to bide his time. That night, he returned to the bar. The owner handed him the gun he had ordered, along with a piece of troubling news. The rebels were planning to attack the city the next day. He warned Danny to leave quickly if he wanted to stay alive. At that very moment, Danny saw Maddie again. Despite their previous falling out, this time they acted like lovers, reuniting after a long separation. But their intentions couldn't have been more different. One sought physical pleasure, the other sought a story. Even in the haze of flirtation, neither of them let their guard down. Growing impatient, Maddie lashed out, saying she'd met too many men like Danny, men who valued profit more than human life. Danny scoffed, but the words struck a nerve. As he went to the bar to get a drink, Maddie followed him, still pushing him. Finally, Danny snapped. "You think you're so righteous? You think you can change Africa?" he said bitterly. "You're just another cog in the blood diamond machine. If it weren't for American girls like you dreaming about fairy tale weddings and shiny rings, these diamonds would be worthless, and no one would be dying for them." But Maddie fired back. "Not every American girl wants a fairy tale wedding. Just like not every African survives by killing their own people. There are good people doing good things every day, just none of them are you." The two parted once again, this time in even more bitter silence. The next morning, as the rebels really did storm the city, and everything descended into chaos, Danny saw a final opportunity. He raced to find Solomon and pleaded with him to cooperate. By this point, the pink diamond was no longer a prize. It had become a deadly curse. Solomon had no channel to sell the diamond, so Danny emphasized his own connections and importance in the black market. Still, Solomon was solely focused on finding his family. Sensing this, Danny snapped, "Without me, you have no chance of ever finding your wife and son." Just as the argument escalated, rebel forces launched a full-scale assault. Amidst the chaos and panic, Danny continued trying to convince Solomon. Shaken by the violence, Solomon reluctantly agreed to cooperate. At this point, government troops also entered the fray, turning the area into a war zone. Neither side cared about civilian lives. Fortunately, Danny, a seasoned mercenary, led Solomon through a hail of gunfire and into the ruins of an abandoned building where they found momentary safety. That night, they used the cover of darkness to make their way toward the only escape, a route out of the city. But 3 rebel soldiers were guarding the checkpoint. If they wanted to escape, they had to take a risk. Danny told Solomon to pretend to be a rebel while he acted as a captured prisoner. When the rebels let their guard down, Danny struck. He swiftly pulled out his gun and shot all 3 dead, adding 2 more bullets just to be sure. Then, spotting a fleeing rebel in the distance, he picked up a sniper rifle and took him out with 1 clean shot. This display of cold precision left Solomon stunned, finally seeing Danny's brutal, merciless side. They blended into a convoy of refugees and made their way to a government-run refugee camp. There, Danny encountered a male journalist who connected him to Mehdi. As soon as they met, Danny made a deal. "I'll give you the information you want, but in exchange, you have to use your UN credentials to help Solomon locate his family in the database." Danny wasn't doing this out of kindness. He knew that in order to get the pink diamond, he had to earn Solomon's trust. And the only way to do that was to reunite him with his loved ones. Mehdi, though wary of being manipulated and certain Solomon was connected to the diamond, still agreed. After all, a greedy smuggler like Danny would never go out of his way to help a poor African fisherman unless there was something in it for him. Yet as a principled journalist, Mehdi prioritized saving lives above all else. She quickly found records of Solomon's family. They had made it to a refugee camp in neighboring Guinea. However, when they arrived by helicopter, the camp was overflowing, sheltering over 1 million displaced people. Finding any individual in such a crowd was a near impossible task. Luckily, fate showed mercy. Solomon miraculously spotted his wife and daughter, but his son Dia was missing, taken by the rebels. Solomon's heart shattered. He had seen firsthand how rebels transformed children into cold-blooded killers, and he feared Dia would be next. Sadly, his worst fears came true. Dia had already been brainwashed and molded by a one-eyed rebel commander into a ruthless soldier. The boy now led deadly raids, showing no trace of emotion while massacring villagers. To make matters worse, fearing the spread of rebellion, the authorities refused to release Solomon's wife and daughter until the conflict ended. Solomon was left broken, wandering the camp in a daze, muttering his son's name every day. Meanwhile, Danny cared only about the diamond. Once he learned where Solomon had buried it, he became obsessed with retrieving it. But the area was remote, crawling with hostile forces. The only feasible plan was to embed themselves within Mehdi's team, who were planning a dangerous journey. At that time, Mehdi was facing her own crisis of faith. A top graduate from a prestigious university, she had the smarts and skills to enjoy a comfortable life in New York. But her heart was driven by a messianic idealism, to expose injustice and alleviate suffering. Still, no matter how moving her articles were or how raw her photographs appeared, all they ever earned were a few tears from distant readers. Nothing truly changed for the people of Africa. Disillusioned, she no longer wanted to merely report the truth. She wanted hard evidence that could dismantle the Blood Diamond network at its core. Perhaps touched by her determination, or simply hoping to secure the diamond, Danny finally opened up. He exposed the entire supply chain behind the Blood Diamond trade. The diamonds were smuggled across borders to neighboring countries, where local buyers handed them off to middlemen. These middlemen bribed customs officers to forge documents, certifying the stones as being mined legally. Once laundered, the diamonds could be sold on international markets without question. And at the Isis center of this corrupt empire was one man, Van Dijk. He hoarded vast quantities of diamonds to manipulate supply and keep global prices high. Van Dijk, the kingpin Danny had named, didn't just hoard diamonds, he actively prolonged the war. By keeping the government, rebels, and mercenary outfits locked in perpetual conflict, he ensured that no single faction could flood the market with rough stones and drive prices down. When Danny finished explaining the scheme, he swore he could supply hard proof, but only after he got his hands on Solomon's pink diamond. "If I expose Van Dijk now," he warned Maddie, "I'll wind up dead and unburied." Maddie agreed, and the two struck a precarious bargain. Danny and Solomon disguised themselves as aid workers and slipped into Maddie's field crew. But before they reached their destination, the convoy was ambushed by rebels. In the chaos, Solomon rescued a terrified child, forcing several of them onto a cramped pickup, while the main bus sped ahead without room. That grim stroke of luck saved their lives. Moments later, rebels massacred everyone on the bus, while Danny's truck veered into thick jungle and disappeared. No sooner had they escaped one danger than they stumbled into another, a band of local guerrillas. Mercifully, these fighters were not in the habit of slaughtering strangers. After an anxious standoff, eased by Maddie's quick gestures and photos proving her press credentials, the guerrillas escorted the trio to a hidden estate deep in the forest. Compared with war-scarred Africa outside its gates, the manor felt like Eden. Children, once abducted and forced to fight, ran about barefoot, laughing, innocence restored through patient care. The estate's owner believed that no soul was irredeemable. Even the worst of men, in a single moment of kindness, could lend life meaning. Danny mulled over those words long into the night. With jungle songs drifting through candlelight and a bottle of rough palm wine loosening his tongue, he finally bared his past to Maddie. He told her he'd been born a white child in Africa. When he was 9, rebels murdered his mother and beheaded his father. War stole everything. At 19, he joined Colonel Coetzee, fighting as a mercenary against black rebels, only to discover it was never about peace, only profit. Disgusted, he went rogue, smuggling diamonds for himself. Now he wanted nothing but a quiet life, and the pink diamond was his ticket out. As Danny's hard features softened with pain, Maddie instinctively took his hand. In that fragile moment, their guarded hearts drew closer. The next morning, the estate's owner insisted on guiding them toward their goal. On the road, they encountered a column of rebel child soldiers, the very unit led by the one-eyed commander who held Solomon's son. Hoping he could appeal to their humanity, the old benefactor stepped forward to speak. The children, hardened beyond mercy, raised their rifles instead. Danny yanked his pistol, shouted for everyone to get back, and when the kids hesitated, he slammed the accelerator. Bullets cracked through the trees as the truck lurched away, but fate steered them straight toward Colonel Coetzee's forward base. The estate's owner was bleeding badly. To save him, Danny had no choice but to pull into the camp. The good news, the old man would live, and Maddie could evacuate with the wounded and other refugees. The bad news, Coetzee was preparing to move. On Kono, the exact area where the diamond lay buried, and he ordered Danny to accompany the assault. Danny knew that if he marched with the main force, he'd never see a single shard of that gem. The moment he stepped out of the command tent, he cornered Maddie. "Draw the guards off the munitions depot," he whispered. "I'll steal what I need and slip out with Solomon alone." Maddie understood, and understood too that Danny might not return. Tears welled, but she nodded. Danny handed her every document, every photo, proof that could topple Van Dijk, so that even if he died at Kono, the world would learn the truth. With Maddie's diversion successful, Danny secured weapons and rejoined Solomon. Their goodbye was wordless but heavy. Somewhere along the road, affection had rooted itself deep. Maddie pressed 3 numbers into Danny's palm, her office, her home, her mobile. She'd always been the pursued. This time she chose to chase. Yet both knew that in this ravaged land, love was a luxury. Each had a separate destiny to fulfill. They trekked toward the diamond's hiding place, Danny finally asked Solomon for details: color, weight, clarity. When Solomon admitted experts might value it at 100,000 carats price or more, the fisherman's weary steps seemed suddenly lighter. In his mind's eye, freedom and family gleamed just ahead, shining as brightly as the stone buried beneath that dead tree in Kono. That very night, disaster struck once again. As a roaring rebel military truck sped past, Solomon caught a glimpse of his son Dia on board. Desperate and unable to contain his emotions, he made a noise, nearly getting both himself and Danny killed by alerting the rebels. After narrowly escaping with their lives, Danny, furious beyond restraint, pulled a knife on Solomon and threatened him, "If you screw up again, I'll skin you alive." But to Solomon, nothing was more precious than his son, not even the rare pink diamond. Despite the threats, he insisted on continuing the search for Dia first. This led to a fierce argument and physical confrontation between the two. Yet, even amidst the chaos, Solomon remained firm, and Danny had no choice but to relent. That night, they crept toward a rebel camp in hopes of finding Dia, but no matter how hard they searched, he was nowhere to be found. They had no choice but to continue on. Once obsessed with the diamond, their conversations began to shift toward their lives, past regrets, hopes, and personal truths. For the first time, they truly started to open up to each other. Danny, with newfound determination, promised Solomon they would save Dia. After trekking through treacherous paths for an entire day and night, the two men finally reached the mine where the pink diamond was buried. However, the place was heavily guarded, making access impossible. Out of options, Danny sent their exact coordinates to the colonel, requesting a heavy assault to break through. He knew this was a risky gamble, but there was no better plan. His hope was that during the chaos of the attack, they could sneak into the mine, retrieve the diamond, and escape unnoticed. But Solomon grew uneasy. His instincts told him that Dia was still inside the rebel stronghold. If the military opened fire, his son could be killed in the crossfire. That night, while Danny slept, Solomon slipped away and infiltrated the rebel camp. Against all odds, he found Dia, but the reunion turned tragic. Dia didn't recognize him. Worse, he saw Solomon as a traitor and had him captured. Danny, realizing Solomon had gone missing, tracked him to the camp. But seeing the situation, he could only wait and observe, hoping for the right moment to act. At dawn, the rebel commander, wounded but still dangerous, appeared. Upon seeing Solomon, his face lit up with joy. He held Solomon at knife point, demanding the location of the pink diamond. Like Danny, the commander dreamed of using the diamond to escape this earthly hell. Under the threat, Solomon prepared to surrender, while Danny, hiding in the shadows, grew anxious. If the commander got the diamond first, their mission would be a failure. Just then, the colonel's helicopters arrived, unleashing a storm of bullets and explosions. The rebel forces were thrown into chaos. Even amidst the confusion, Danny kept his focus. He had to protect Dia. That was the only way to get Solomon to talk. Braving gunfire, Danny rescued Dia, while Solomon seized the opportunity to settle the score. He grabbed a metal rod and crushed the one-eyed commander's skull. With superior firepower, the rebel resistance was crushed. Now everyone's attention turned once again to Solomon. They all knew he was the only one who knew where the diamond was hidden. He kept silent, aware that the diamond's location was his only leverage. The colonel issued an ultimatum. If Danny could get Solomon to talk, he'd agree to a 50-50 split. If not, both men would die. To force his hand, Danny dragged Dia into view. Once again, Solomon was faced with the same weakness. His son, with Yi. No other choice, he agreed. They headed to the burial site, only to find it had already been dug up and destroyed by the rebels. Exhausted and discouraged, Solomon began digging again. Both men knew the truth. Once the diamond was recovered, their lives would no longer be safe. Danny, sensing the tension, asked one of the soldiers for a cigarette but was denied. Then, with a knowing tone, he said, "Doesn't matter. I was planning to quit anyway, right?" Solomon understood immediately. During the journey, Danny had once said that quitting smoking would help preserve his strength, something he'd do once they got the diamond. Now, trusting each other more than ever, Solomon agreed to take the risk with him. He pretended to uncover the diamond, drawing everyone's attention. Danny took the chance to kill one of the soldiers. Solomon, too, used the chaos to attack the colonel. The colonel fought back, firing his weapon. Danny ducked into the jungle, then suddenly re-emerged and finished off the colonel. Soon after, Solomon truly unearthed the pink diamond, but in the crossfire, Danny had been shot in the abdomen. With time running out and the enemy closing in, they grabbed the diamond and fled. Unexpectedly, Dear blocked their escape with a gun. Solomon spoke from the heart, pleading with his son. His words reached the part of Dear that still remembered, his father. Dear's long-buried conscience began to stir. Just as they reconciled, gunfire forced them to run again. While fleeing, Danny contacted their allies, arranging for a helicopter to pick them up. The extraction point was on a mountaintop ahead, 10 kilometers of grueling terrain. As they ascended, Danny's breathing grew heavier. Solomon urged him to rest, but danger loomed behind them. Stopping meant death, so they pushed forward. Midway. Up the slope, Danny collapsed from exhaustion. Without hesitation, Solomon hoisted him onto his back and continued the climb. But not long after, Danny knew his time had come. He was dying. With his last strength, he pulled out the pink diamond, the stone he had traded his life for. And yet, as he lay bleeding and broken, he knew he would never live to spend a single cent of it. Although Danny understood the truth that many die for wealth, success being so close still left him with a tinge of regret. However, in the end, he chose to hand the pink diamond to Solomon. Not only that, he also gave Solomon Maddie's business card, instructing him to call her once he reached the capital and ask for her help. Danny handed him a gun too, warning him not to trust his own men under any circumstance. Solomon offered to carry Danny on his back, but Danny insisted he go on without him and take his son home. Just then, enemy troops caught up to them. To buy. Time for Solomon and his son to escape. Danny braced himself with his weapon and began firing back alone. Only after watching Solomon and his son disappear into the distance did he allow himself to relax and take a deep breath. Then he used the satellite phone to call Maddie, begging her to do everything she could to rescue Solomon and his son. At first, Maddie was delighted to hear from him, but as she listened to his increasingly labored breathing, her heart sank. She knew something was wrong. A helicopter from his own side roared overhead, but Danny no longer felt any regret. Instead, he simply looked at the view and said with a sigh, "The scenery here is beautiful. I wish you were here with me." At least he had told her the real story. She'd have enough material to write now. At that moment, Maddie finally understood what Danny meant. Through her tears, she whispered, "I wish I could be there with you." But Danny replied gently, saying it was all right. He was exactly where he was meant to be. After hanging up, Danny grasped a handful of blood-soaked soil beside him. Perhaps it was destiny, as the colonel had once said. Despite all his efforts to escape this land, in the end, he was born and died here. As the brilliant sunset bathed the land in light, Danny Archer closed his eyes and became the brightest flash of white on that dark continent. Not long after, Solomon, with Maddie's help, brought the pink diamond to London. Thanks to Maddie's meticulous planning, they arranged a discreet deal with one of the executives at a major diamond cartel. As part of the agreement, they were promised help in reuniting Solomon with his family. Eventually, Solomon's family was brought back together, and Maddie recorded the entire transaction. She later used the evidence to expose the dark truths behind the blood diamond trade. Solomon also stood up as a witness, sharing with the world the bloody stories that had unfolded across Africa. Finally, in May 2003, 40 nations signed the Kimberley certification process, which required all legally mined diamonds to be sealed in tamper-proof containers and accompanied by a Kimberley certificate before export. Any diamonds of unknown origin would henceforth be banned. Blood Diamond is a dramatic film directed by Edward Zwick, starring Leonardo DiCaprio and Djimon Hounsou. Released in 2006, the film sheds light on the brutal civil wars and illicit diamond trade of Africa in the 1990s. Back then, millions of innocent civilians lost their lives because of the ruthless pursuit of wealth through conflict diamonds. Danny Archer, though a white man, had grown up amidst the chaos of Africa. Surrounded by endless wars and lawless smuggling, he lived by trafficking illegal diamonds, all the while dreaming of escaping the war-torn land. But he never had enough money to leave. So when he learned about the rare pink diamond, he did everything he could to get close to Solomon, the man who had hidden it. Eventually, Danny succeeded in obtaining the diamond, but was mortally wounded before he could enjoy its spoils. Yet in those short days with Solomon, helping him search for his son and listening to Maddie's ideals and dreams, Danny began to change. From a selfish, ruthless man, he transformed into someone capable of love and warmth. In the final moments of his life, he chose to return the diamond to Solomon, and Solomon, rather than keeping it for himself, worked with Maddie to conduct an illegal deal with a diamond monopoly. Using the transaction records and evidence Danny had left behind, they exposed the bloody truth behind Sierra Leone's diamond trade. Diamonds, at their core, are nothing more than clear stones. But driven by greed and the pursuit of luxury, humans have elevated them into symbols of purity, status, and power. To maximize profit, the darkness within human nature surfaced, leading to exploitation and violence. International agreements may slow or even halt the sale of conflict diamonds, but they cannot eliminate human greed. Telling people not to buy a certain product tainted by guilt may not stop them either. For the venomous snake named ambition still slithers quietly within every human heart. The satisfaction people fail to find in diamonds will eventually be sought in something else, perhaps another luxury item or another form of immorality. Thus, we shouldn't boycott a material object that is inherently neutral. Instead, we must learn to examine our own desires and harmonize the relationship between ourselves and the world. We must regulate our wants, confront our own falsehoods, and listen to our conscience. Because what is truly soaked in blood has never been the diamond. It is the insatiable greed and ever-expanding desires of mankind. The value of a film lies in its message. The value of a review lies in how deeply it resonates with the viewer. And that concludes today's story. Thank you for watching. What did you think of this film? Let us know in the comments below.